Good news, everyone. Okay, this time that's a lie. There's no good news, only good questions. But in my opinion, these are the questions that we need to be asking. So, into the world of conspiracy we go. Alright, viewers, time for a pop quiz. Fill in the answer to this quote. There is no action without blank. The answer? Well, if you guessed motive, you were right. If you guessed something else, well, I can't guarantee that you were wrong, but you aren't getting any marks on this test. But that's alright. There's no action without motive, regardless of how serious or trifling we perceive that motive to be. And it is this premise upon which I ask my first question about the Syrian Sarin gas attack. And that is, what was the motive? Now, if we accept the premise that there is no action without motive, then we must ascertain the motive of any individual with whom we seek to lay the blame of the gas attack, if it was an attack at all, but that's a point for later. For now, let's assume that Bashar al Assad's forces, whether under his immediate direction or under the purview of his military leaders, were indeed responsible for the Khan Shaykhun gas release. So, in what ways would Bashar al Assad benefit from the release of sarin gas in an area with significant background, that is to say, with a notable intermingling of hostiles and civilians? Well, perhaps we should ask what any commander would stand to gain from a targeted gas attack and then work from there. In historical usage, militarized gas has been used to create breaks in enemy lines that may be readily exploited with a ground based offensive. Indeed, the first use of chlorine gas was an underwhelming one, as the German command, not convinced of the chlorine gas's potential, had not prepared a follow up attack to exploit the opening in the enemy lines. Chemical weapons like sarin have also been used by individuals like Saddam Hussein to target and decimate civilian populations as a method of ethnic cleansing and intimidation. In the Bloody Friday gas attack on Iraqi Kurds in Halabja, I've probably butchered that and I apologize, Saddam Hussein's forces murdered between 3,200 and 5,000 civilians, with another 7 to 10,000 injured. Such is the result of a targeted gas attack on a civilian population. So, knowing this, what did we see in April 4th's gas attack on Khan Shaykhun? Between 74 and 100 killed, and another 300 to 557 injured. Now, think to the story of the first German gas attack in the First World War. What was the major flaw in that day's events? Of course, there was no follow up attack. As it was with the gassing of Khan Shaykhun, there was no follow up offensive aimed at the city and no militarily significant impact of the gas. Now, this is not in any way to say that the deaths and injuries suffered were not significant as an event, but rather they were militarily insignificant. Khan Shaykhun was not in a vulnerable geographic position, and Syrian forces could have no reasonable expectation of being able to make it to Khan Shaykhun in the event of a properly executed militarized gas attack. Even so, gas was most definitely released in the town, and people were killed. These things we know. So, knowing that the Syrian military could not take direct advantage of the gassing, and that there was no significant military target in Khan Shaykhun aside from it possibly being a logistics center based upon its position being roughly equidistant from several Syrian salients in the front lines around the time of the attack, what could the motivation be for the Syrian forces to unleash gas upon this particular target? The only possible motive that comes to mind is the desire to intimidate one's enemies with the prospect of being attacked with a chemical weapon again, letting them know that you are willing to cross that line which has only been crossed by the most desperate or deranged individuals since the First World War. Now, this motive could be taken as a possibility if not for the fact that the UN's Independent International Commission on Inquiry on the Syrian Arab Republic found that the sarin gas used in the Ghouta chemical attack in August of 2013 had distinct hallmarks of the sarin gas known to be held in the Syrian chemical arsenal. So, we know that this attack could not have been the precursor to an immediate offensive, nor could it have been used as a first demonstration of ability or willingness to unleash gas. So, what do we have left? What do we know? That question, dear viewer, is one that I cannot answer just now. If not for fear and intimidation and not to soften up an infantry element in advance of a ground offensive, then I personally cannot fathom, aside from sheer deranged psychosis, why such an attack would be ordered from the perspective of the Syrian state military. And that, dear viewer, is where I'll leave this video. Was it all a conspiratorial piece of content? Was this all just a big tinfoil hat, false flag goose chase? No, I'm sorry to say it, I've no desire to sell you on conspiracies or crackpot concepts. All I want to do is inspire you to ask some basic questions when faced with complex situations like this whole Syrian one. And that's that for another video, folks. I'd like to take this moment to thank you all for making it this far and to ask you to like and share the video if you've enjoyed it, or if it's made you ask yourself a couple of questions. And of course, if you've enjoyed it and you want to see more from me in the future, subscribe to my channel, and of course, consider becoming one of my Patreon patrons for access to Patreon exclusive content and a spot in my end of video Patreon credit roll. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good one.